Hey Simon, do you want to kick us off with The Fall Guy?
Yeah, look, let's do that. In cinemas this week is an adaptation of a much forgotten, apparently, old TV show. It's called The Fall Guy. Let's have a look at a clip.
I'm just a stunt guy, trying to look cool in front of the director of this movie. That's her, who I just so happen to have a major crush on.
We need to keep it super profesh.
Cool. Do you want to make out?
Nope.
Because I don't either. It's not what I'm into right now.
Making out?
Yeah.
What are you into?
Talking.
Yeah.
There's just one little wrinkle.
The star of the movie
Tom Ryder.
is missing. We need you to find him.
Why me?
You're a stuntman. No one's going to notice whether you're here or not. No offense.
I mean, some taken.
Simon, can I ask a question? Because you're a man of a different vintage than I. Do you remember watching
Yes.
The Fall Guy? Is this a beloved memory in your life? Like, where does this rank in the pantheon of Simon Foster's 80s greatest hits?
Okay, I was very interested to hear what you had to say in the opening because, yes, I know it's not spoken of in the same sort of universe as things like the A-Team.
No, Simon, it's not spoken of. It is a forgotten TV show.
First of all, in answer to your question, yes, I adored The Fall Guy. It was one of my absolute must-watches every week. You will note in this film, which I'll get to in a minute, they all wear the puffy, sleeveless sort of vest type of thing to keep the cold out, although it doesn't matter if your arms are cold. I had one of that. I bought one of those because of The Fall Guy and Lee Majors wearing it in the TV series. So for me, The Fall Guy was probably a bigger deal than the A-Team, or was a bigger deal than, well, it was earlier, but Starsky and Hutch. But those sort of iconic shows that have already had the big screen going over, The Fall Guy was a much more sort of a tangible memory for me than those. So I do know all the words to the song of the opening credit from the Fall Guy TV series, which I will sing later in the podcast somewhere randomly, just to make sure you keep listening. What they've done with this new movie, and it's taken a while to sort of come around in terms of the period between when the Fall Guy first aired on television and this one. It's strange that it's not really anything like the TV series. There's kind of a...
But Simon, does it need to be, though? I mean, the reality is...
No, not at all.
The reality with the show is that it was a show which hasn't really, at least as far as like I'm aware in terms of like an Australian context, I've never seen it on TV, like ever. I've never seen it pop up on Foxtel. I don't remember ever seeing repeats on the show, on the, broadcast TV. I don't know if it's ever been repeated really since it finished in about 1985. As far as I'm aware, this is a show that just doesn't really exist. And I never hear people talk about it. You hear people talk about shows from the 80s like other Stephen J. Cannell shows. So, you're talking about the milieu of programs, including things like Magnum P.I., which is still regularly in rotation. I see that as repeats constantly. The A-Team still crops up quite a fair bit. Airwolf, Knight Rider, all these sorts of programs still get quite a fair bit of play, but this, no one talks about it and no one's seen it. So I don't know that it was important at all that they even do the cameos, which you do find in the closing credits of this. As far as I'm concerned, they can just take the name and run with it, which is largely what they've done, and I think it's all the better for it.
Yeah, look, I don't think the elements of the TV show that do come across in the film is the crime element. There's a fairly tepid sort of subplot in this one involving Aaron Taylor Johnson as a dirty superstar who's caught up in horrible shenanigans, and it's as ineffectual in this as it ever was in the TV series. So in that regard, they kind of get it right. What you have in Ryan Gosling as the Lee Majors sort of stand-in in this is that he is a kind of a buffoon, and sort of finds himself caught up in a whole lot of things that allow for Ryan Gosling to work his charm and to work his comedic chops, which are considerable. He's thoroughly likable in this, but it doesn't give him a lot of opportunity to sort of drill down on the dramatic moments in this, whether it's in the love affair with, or the sort of simmering along sexual tension between him and director Emily Blunt, who plays the character that was meant to have hired him for this film, but apparently didn't. You have sort of elements that also speak to the big random type of action sequences and stunt work that was synonymous with the TV series, but they've been able to set it in a movie sort of making against a movie making backdrop that makes it seem all the more credible. And that his skill as a stuntman then crosses over into the criminality of the world around him, which is kind of silly. Look, I'm going to say, and it's not because I love the original series so much. I have no particular affinity for it. I don't think I would have watched it if it had been repeated many times over. But this seemed like a very rote, very forced bit of romantic action comedy that when you compare it against not so much the TV show of the past, but some of the great action romantic comedies like Romancing the Stone or films of that ilk, it comes up well short. The other thing I want to say is that as a film that wants to celebrate and I guess commemorate the great stunts and great stunt work and what stuntmen do, there's an awful lot of CGI in it. And I think that sort of sucked the fun out of it for me. The minute I saw a blurry background or a bad green screen or some dropped in effect shot, I kind of got out of it because this was meant to be director David Leitch's sort of honouring of his craft and of his community. But in the end, I thought it kind of let them down a little bit. So I didn't love The Fall Guy. At 2 hours and 6 minutes, it's too long. It begins to take the crime subplot far too seriously when there's no need to do that at all. And I don't think it gives Emily Blunt enough to do given the talent that she is. So this is good. It's okay. For a film that cost this much and shut down most of Sydney to film it, should it have been better? Yeah, it should have been.
I mean, first of all, I don't care they shut down Sydney to do it. Like, you know, that's just how movies work. Like,
you're in Brisbane.
Yeah, but this is it. Like, cities get shut down all the time for movies. It doesn't matter. Like, you'll give a pass to something that, you know, shut down, you know, a city you're not in for God knows how long. I don't. That's really a metric to necessarily judge things by. Look, this is a film that I actually had a really good time with. It's not one of the greats, certainly by any means. It is a love letter to stuntmen and the industry that supports them. I felt that. I actually really enjoyed the pairing of Blunt and Gosling in this one. I like their relationship. It's not an all-timer, but certainly it is definitely one of the strengths of this film. It actually really worked in a way I hadn't expected. I found this is a film that coasts completely on charisma of its leads, and the script was certainly wanting in parts. But where I think the film actually has a genuine problem is this is a movie about stunt work. There should be one major set piece which everyone's walking away from that saying, holy crap, did you see what they managed to achieve there? It should have been the sequence, and sorry, it's kind of in the trailers, and I think people know about it because they've shut down Sydney for a little bit there. There's a very lengthy car chase sequence where Ryan Gosling's doing standard stunt movie type stuff of hanging off cars and, you know, falling off and, you know, sparks flying everywhere. He's on some sort of metal thing that's falling behind a car. You know, there's all that sort of stuff. And it's not so much the stunt work and the concept of the chase sequence, but it's just really badly filmed. It's too close up. Like, you can't really appreciate the stunt work that's at play there. And it actually takes what should have been a really just energetic sort of, holy crap, they're actually doing it moment. And it just kind of felt like one of the flatter moments in the movie. And the problem for the film, and you talked about the runtime, is that coming straight off the back of that scene is where the film takes itself seriously, which I think it needs to do because that's a hallmark of this as a genre, and we'll swing back to that as an idea in just a sec. But it takes itself a bit too seriously, and that sequence where it takes itself too seriously extends into a further sort of twist sequence where we've got like an additional set piece that's sort of tacked onto the end of that, and it just feels too long from that point in. So there is a bit of an editing issue at that point of the film. So it goes from unrealized potential of an action sequence to badly edited final acts, which that's kind of where I think the enthusiasm, this should be a film where people left it with like just a bit of a spring in their step, and it kind of felt a little bit like a slog as it reached those final moments in the show, in the film.
Agree. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I agree with that. I was at the premiere of this at the State Theatre where director David Leitch and the producer, or Leitch, maybe you pronounce it.
Leitch.
Got up and detailed for the audience the major stunt in the film, which was an 8.5 car 8.5 roll car flipping stunt, which takes place in the first half hour of the film. Now, I thought that was odd because it sets a very high standard that it doesn't meet later on. And it builds up to that as if it's almost the climax of the film in that first half hour. From that point on, the plot starts to unfold about the gambling and the Aaron Taylor Johnson character, who's quite a bit of fun in this, but not in the movie enough. And the actual end sequence, which all takes place, and I'm going to try to avoid spoilers here, on the sand dunes of Kurnell here in Sydney, and is really just a series of sort of colourful explosions with a bit of helicopter work, and it kind of and the CGI stuff popped in there. It looked like a really shoddily put together final half hour of this film, and I thought it struggled with pacing. So in that regard, I think this is a disappointment. I didn't think there was much chemistry or enough opportunity for there to be chemistry between Blunt and Gosling. There was that extended sequence where they joke about movies on the phone and they joke about split screen stuff, which is kind of like an odd sort of in joke for the movie buffs out there, that didn't sort of really play particularly well in the cinema. But if it's enough, see, you sound very much like Fiona, my wife, who came out saying, "Yeah, that was okay. That's exactly what it's meant to be," and it's just a light piece of fluff. And I'm thinking, well, it doesn't have to be just a light piece of fluff, and it could, even light pieces of fluff can be constructed better than this was.
So I think it's very well constructed for a light piece of fluff for the most part. Not everything works in it, but obviously there's some failures along the way. Two things. So one, I actually think that you've done yourself a massive disservice seeing this in the State Theatre, which the State Theatre, I've seen a couple of movies in the State Theatre. I don't think it's a great venue to go and see a movie. I know why they put it there.
I was 2 rows from the front. I was literally sitting under. I couldn't have seen it on a bigger, better, louder screen. If it was going to win me over, it was going to win me over from the seat I was in. I promise you. We were the first ones in there. We had to wait like an hour for the movie to start.
Yeah, again.
But we were sitting in literally the front row.
But again, you're waiting an hour for the movie to start. Like, I just don't think it's the best, environment to judge something which is so lightweight. I saw this as a man of the people. It was
oh God,
it was a pretty standard screening. Like, it was a media screening, but I didn't see like there were media hypes in there at all. It was just seemed like generic.
Man,
got a free ticket to a movie. But it was a pretty generic screening, and I got stuck right up the front, which really annoys me because I do not care for that. I prefer to get a bit of distance from myself and the screen so I can actually see the damn thing. But generally, it was a good sort of lighthearted vibe in the room, and everyone was kind of there for it. I got a good energy from the crowd. But if people are after just a bit of a vibe as to exactly what this is, Simon sort of poo-pooed it a bit. But what I think people need to know about what this film is, it is probably on that same sort of level as a McGee's Charlie's Angels from 2000. It's sort of, it's definitely playing at that sort of a level. But it's reminded me of a lot of films from probably that early sort of 1990s period where it's movies based on TV shows, but they're not really love letters to the shows that much. In some respects, they're probably a little bit embarrassed about the original source material. And one of the hallmarks of that era is that you do get the film taking itself way too seriously towards that final act. And this film absolutely played into that. And to me, I enjoyed the vibe of that. And it certainly felt like a movie I haven't really seen on screen for a little while. So I largely enjoyed it. I'm also not telling people to rush to the cinema to see it. For people getting to the cinema, it's sometimes a $25 ticket, if not sometimes more. I don't know the movies that, but if you can get a cheapish ticket to it and you're just looking for a way to spend a few hours, it's time well spent in that kind of a environment.
Can I just very quickly say that if you want to see a movie that has the romantic vibe, the amazing stunt work, and the general sense of good timiness to do with the world of stunts, check out Burt Reynolds in Hooper. It is streaming on the Foxtel channels for nothing. It is exactly the kind of film that The Fall Guy should be. It has such a great comic chemistry between all the lead characters. for its time also set a world record for a stunt in a movie. I won't give away what it is, but it's a pretty spectacular piece of work, and it features one of the most charming performances, not just from Burt Reynolds and Sally Field, but from the late great Jan Michael Vincent as well. Burt Reynolds surrounds himself with a great comic cast, and Hooper is one of the great joys of Hollywood stunt movie making. So I challenge you to watch The Fall Guy, ponder about what went wrong with it, and then have a look at Hooper and see what could have been. So that's my old man take on better movies from the past.
Okay, so I'm going to check out Hooper. I've never seen the movie. Also, I don't know if I've ever heard of Hooper. So anyway, this is my homework for the week. I'll go and check out Hooper. Okay, so I'm...
All right, let's move on. You've got something interesting to see, which I know nothing about. What's Knuckles, Dan?
Sorry, did you say interesting? Look, I've certainly seen this TV program. It's called Knuckles. It is the live-action spin-off from the live-action Sonic the Hedgehog movies. Let's watch a clip.
You're an alien. You're super powerful. You recently saved the world with your friends. What do you like to do for fun?
Vengeance.
I was thinking more like reading or yoga.
So look, if you haven't seen the Sonic the Hedgehog movies, there probably isn't necessarily much of a draw card in there for this one. This is a film, and look, I'll admit, so my own relationship with the Sonic the Hedgehog movies, I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s as a Nintendo kid. I was not a Sega guy. I appreciated that Sonic the Hedgehog was around, but Mario is my guy. And Sonic with his fast running, look, I understand it was a bit flashy at the time, but whatever. I required more substance than that. And a couple of years after the hype of Sonic started dying down, I played the game and it was good, but like it wasn't great. I don't know. It was never really huge into Sonic. But I did watch the first 25, 30 minutes of the first live-action Sonic the Hedgehog film a few months ago. Again, I had no attachments to Sonic, so I wasn't rushing out to the cinema to see it. This is a film which I only watched because I was looking for something to watch with my kid that was kid-friendly, and it just stopped being a bit too kid-friendly for what was then like a 18-month, 2-year-old, something like that. It was maybe just a little bit much at that age, but she's probably okay for it now.
Good.
It was just, circumstance. So I only saw the first half hour as a responsible parent, or irresponsible parent for even watching half an hour. Who can say? But, this is the thing. I think the only reason why a adult would be interested in watching these Sonic the Hedgehog films is one of two things. One, I've got an attachment to Sonic from being a, kid or a teenager playing that in the 80s into the 90s, or they're watching it because they're a parent and their kids are looking for a family-friendly movie to watch. And so, as a family-friendly film, I think that Sonic the Hedgehog played fantastically well. It was a way more engaging movie from what I saw than I really expected. It was pretty fun, and I totally understand why.
To which I would add a third. To which I would add. Sorry. To which I would add a third element, and that is that I'm a media person who has to watch it to fill 10 minutes of a podcast, so I went and saw both the Sonic the Hedgehog movie.
Okay. Well, look, you shouldn't have done that. But I think that if you were someone who watched that first film and found it really fun as a family movie and watched it with your kids, you're probably definitely more than likely to see the second one. You're probably more than likely to check out the third one, which debuts later this year. Okay. And also, you're probably going to sit down and press play on Knuckles, and I think you're going to have a pretty good time with this. It is very much of the movies. It takes the Knuckles character that comes into it in the second movie, voiced by Idris Elba. It spins him off into his own thing. He's hanging out with his protege, which is Adam Pally, who played a character called Wade in the first, probably all three movies as far as I'm aware, playing the same character. And that takes those two characters out kind of on a road trip away from the forest area that they're living in the Sonic the Hedgehog films. And it's Wade learning to become a battle echidna in the same way that Knuckles is. The criticism I've heard from people that have seen more than the first episode is that Knuckles isn't in it enough. That may become a bit of an issue. Now, I only watched the first episode because, trust me, there is nothing in this that convinced me that I needed to see more than this. But I think that if my kid was in the room and she's a little bit older and would watch those Sonic films together, I think that we absolutely would have stuck with this and watched it all the way through because it's not objectionable. The only thing that I found was that there was nothing to hang on to as an adult viewer, and a lot of the comedy is that same sort of, and this in those Sonic films as well, and Simon, you can sort of attest to this. It's that kind of semi-ironic humor that you kind of find in a lot of kids' films these days, and that stuff just doesn't really play that well with me. It just, I don't know, it feels like a Geico ad just for like 90 minutes to 2 hours. It's a bit much. And suddenly I realized that Australians don't really know Geico ads very much. But just understand, it's a series of very semi-ironic comedic ads that play in the US.
The
Broadly, sorry, my
guess,
top level, Simon, is check it out if you've got a family, like young family members, and you're looking for a family experience. But this isn't something that you're probably checking out as an adult, even if you do have a lot of familiarity with the Sonic and Knuckles characters from your childhood yourself.
The other great draw for the Sonic movie, certainly for my age group, and I should say I have kind of an affinity with Sonic, not specifically because I played it to any great extent, but because it was such a major part of one of my early professional roles as a sales rep. We actually got to sell the Sonic stuff, so I did have sort of a fondness for the character. But the other great pull was Jim Carrey, going full Jim Carrey in that first film, and even more unbridled in the second film. Does he make an appearance, or is he likely to make an appearance in the world of Knuckles, the TV show?
Look, so the first episode has some clips from the movies at the very beginning, as you hear a bit of backstory as to who everyone is and whatnot. So you do see Jim Carrey, but it's not new footage. You do see Sonic, you do see Tails. You don't see James Marsden. He's away out of town for no specific reason. Whether he crops up in later episodes, I'm not too sure. I doubt it, though. This is very much... Look, there's a type of TV show that exists, which is the spin-off from the movie, and they often go in one of two ways. Often it will be taking characters from the movie and it will be taking them off into an entirely different sort of story of their own. The main actors from the movies never appear, but usually Eugene Levy, who was there playing a supporting character, will crop up in a much larger role in the spin-off. And that's kind of what you got here. So you kind of have a bit of that action happening. But you do have Sonic, and like you've got the original, well, the same voice actors from the movie, so that's certainly present, but you're not going to find those big marquee actors. And I can't believe I'm labeling James Marsden as a big marquee actor, but that's where we're at.
His name is a bit sullied after that Quiet on the Set documentary and the fact that he wrote a letter of support for the
I think
the ugly man at the set.
Lots of people fell into that as well. But look, I sort of tapped on it a second ago there. This is part of a genre of spin-off TV shows from movies. And what I think is probably important to consider about this is there is a new trend happening in cinema, and it comes completely off the back of what I've been nattering on about in this podcast and my newsletter for some time, which is this blurring between cinema and TV, where you've got a lot of movie actors appearing in TV shows and vice versa, and characters sort of come across both. Budgets have exploded on the TV side of things. Special effects have generally gotten better for TV. And there's generally, outside of the fact that a movie is conceptually a contained, 2 to 7 hour proposition, it's sort of, that's changing a little bit with multiple sequels, with, extended universes, all that sort of business. So like that blurring is happening more and more. But that's led to this trend that has been in the works for a couple of years now, and we're finally seeing the fruits of this. But it's this idea that if you've got a big movie franchise, you have a companion TV show that runs alongside of it. Quite literally runs along the side, as a Sonic and Knuckles spin-off is. So this is the first sort of big one of these, where it is the sets from the movies, it is the voice actors playing the characters, some of the supporting characters. It's set very much in the world of these films, and it probably will bridge the second and third Sonic films in some sort of a manner. This is that you're going to see in a few months' time The Penguin, which is a spin-off from the Batman movies that are playing. There's a Dune TV series, which I know was called The Sisterhood, but I'm not sure if it's got that name still. That's going to debut probably later this year or early next year on Max, and here in Australia, probably on Binge, unless we've got Max by the time that that show launches. this is a big trend you're going to see. This is where big Hollywood event spectacle is taking us right now, and this is the first one of those. So again, if you like those Sonic movies, Knuckles is probably part of that experience that you're probably going to want to sit and enjoy.
That sort of answers my question I was about to ask about in a different time when the streamers weren't so hungry for content, and when sort of exactly as you've described there, the crossing over of properties between big and small screens happens and is starting to happen a whole lot more. I imagine, given the success of the first two Sonic films, Knuckles might have been its own standalone movie franchise. They might have sort of gone off in that direction and created a Sonic verse or a Sonic universe for the big screen. But that's now traveling across screens, big and small. So plenty of watching there.
Okay, Simon, as we record this, it is Thursday, the 25th of April. Okay. We had our rundown for the program. We did our reviews. Right now, we would usually say, hey, Simon, let's spin off to the intermission. But wait, Simon, first time we've ever done this on the podcast. Breaking review. We're dropping a review into the review section.
What?
Unexpected. Okay. Literally.
Oh, this terrifies me.
Okay, here we go. Wait for it. We're just going to seamlessly go in as though this was planned all along. Wait for it, folks. Okay, Simon, let's move on to the next review. Starting on Paramount Plus, this week, we've got the brand new Good Wife spin-off. It's called Elsbeth.
I love New York. I've always wanted to live here. All those lights, oh, it's magical. Oh, this is my stop.
You know, this is not an Uber.
Yeah, but you were heading up this way. Hi, I'm Elsbeth Tassioni. I'm the thingy thing.
The thinking thing.
The outside observer.
I think you should,
Oh my God, I didn't even remember I was wearing that. Wow, what is all this?
a suicide.
I mostly see crime scene photos. This is very different. Better.
Excuse me?
Oh, don't worry, I can see it.
So, long-time viewers of The Good Wife and the spin-off series The Good Fight will be familiar with the character of Elsbeth Tassioni. She was a very quirky lawyer, certainly on the spectrum, and I don't have it in front of me here. As I said, this is an impromptu review, but she probably appeared in maybe 10 episodes of The Good Wife throughout its 7-season run, and then also appeared in probably an equal number of episodes of The Good Fight as it came along. She is a quirky lawyer, but really, really good and completely on her game. And she played very much if you're going to have a lawyer version of Columbo, okay, she'd be the sort of lawyer who'd be sort of like wait, there's just one more thing. And then she'd pick up on some sort of very small little phrase that somebody used and spin that off into something which would win them the case or give them the research they need to be able to, bring case to conclusion. She's, as played by Carrie Preston, a lot of fun, and when I heard there was going to be a TV series spin-off of Elsbeth, I was somewhat concerned. So, Good Wife series creators, Robin and Michelle King, they are on board here. They're not the showrunners, they're still finishing off the last season of Evil, but they've brought someone on and they are involved to the point where they've written episodes. A couple of episodes are directed by Robert King. So they are very much involved in it. They're just not doing the day-to-day show running on the program. So you can very much rest assured, if you're a fan of The Good Wife and Good Fight, you can come into this and you'll know that the characters are being treated with respect and there is a continuity of vibe and creative intent here. What they do with the character, though, is they completely upshift her. In the same way as when Lou Grant left the Mary Tyler Moore Show, they've taken Carrie Preston's character Elsbeth to an entirely new city. She's got an entirely new type of a job. Here she is being brought in as a consultant to the New York Police Department. So she's working with the police closely. She is a lawyer, but she's not practicing as a lawyer. She's there to tell the police whether they're doing the right thing or not. In this one, she's not welcomed by the police, so the captain of the police, Captain Wagner, as played by Wendell Pierce, who everyone loves, it's Bunk from The Wire, it's that guy. He's in there, and so he's the one that's kind of brought her in and is sympathetic to the fact that she needs to be there, and he's trying to sort of calm the temperatures down of everyone else. But no one else really quite wants her there, except for a couple of the other more junior level cops, particularly Kaya Blank, I think is the name of the character, played by Carrie Preston, and she's more or less the co-lead in this series. So she is a cop who is maybe sort of slightly uncomfortable with some of the things that she's asked to do around the place. And the Elsbeth character allows her to break out a little bit more and have a bit more agency over her work. But there is a bit of a twist that takes place at the end of the first episode, and I'm going to kind of ruin that slightly. Essentially, what Elsbeth's being brought to do in New York isn't strictly just being a consultant. She's also working for someone else. So there is a ongoing storyline, which is a little bit heavier than you sort of think from the first episode. But that vibe of the first episode completely carries through. It doesn't start getting like, darker. Instead, it just keeps on with this sort of tone, which this is a modern day Columbo TV program. They've taken that strength of what the Elsbeth character was kind of doing in The Good Wife. They've toned back some of the idiosyncrasies and the extremity of that. She's now just kind of more of a kooky oddball. This is a spin-off from The Good Wife. You don't need to have ever seen The Good Wife or The Good Fight to enjoy this program. All you're really going to see is a bit of a kooky, strange lady coming in, consulting with the police, but working against the police as she keeps on seeing sort of, stuff the police aren't seeing, and following sort of her clues on tangents of their own, and upsetting the police, and being celebrated by the police at the same time. And there's always going to be some sort of murder mystery of the week that needs to be solved. Basically, if you want a bit of a throwback to 80s TV, like a Columbo, like a Murder, She Wrote, like a Magnum PI, you are well and truly being serviced by this program. It is so much fun. I really enjoy it, Simon.
And I know nothing about this, and I'm absolutely enthused by your review for it. I'm also very happy to see Carrie Preston get her own series. Just skimming through her IMDb credits, I realized I've liked her in so many things where she's supported a whole lot of other actors and actresses. Going all the way back. Oh, God, she's been working since My Best Friend's Wedding back in the late 90s. So to see her get the opportunity to create a fully fleshed out and full-bodied character as Elsbeth is just terrific. So I'm very keen to have a look at this.
Yeah, and it was always weird. Like, this has always been her iconic signature character. And so after so many years after she started off in The Good Wife, for her to suddenly be in a spin-off series as that character, it's got to be very heartening to her career-wise for that character to still be driving so much of her career, because she'll forever be identified with it. So now it's actually paying off for her in a really big way. But then also, it's as a viewer, I think it's really heartening to see this character that you've been following for so long suddenly being pushed into the spotlight. And I think it is absolutely fair for people to go into this with a bit of to have some apprehension is probably the phrase I wanted. Being a little bit concerned that such an extreme character being pushed into the limelight, the spotlight, is maybe just going to be a bit much. But the show handles it really, really nicely, and I think is probably even more accessible than The Good Wife was, which is interesting because it's such an accessible program in itself.
All right. So where do the screen watching hordes see this great new show?
Look, I believe that it's on Paramount Plus.
All right. Good to know. And that kind of wraps up the review segment.